Good morning or good afternoon, or I don't know, whenever you are watching this, I guess. Um, I I'm Mr. Loyd. You guys may not recognize me. Got a fresh cut here. Kind of trimmed it up a little bit. Um, okay, so today we're going to be talking about sectionalism. All right, and so the big thing that I want to kind of drive home about this chapter is what is driving this rift between the North and the South at this point in American history. There's a lot of things. Okay, we could take that spice chart: social, political, interactive, cultural, economic. Let's actually go ahead and do that. Why don't you actually let's start this off in the Ed puzzle. I want you guys to give me two spice chart categories. Okay, so just two. So social, political, interactive, cultural, economic. Pick two of those and tell me why are we having this divide, okay, between the North and the South this time. So go ahead and do that. Okay, all right, I'm sure a lot of you guys said, okay, obviously slavery is the big one, okay? And slavery is a huge aspect of this, okay? But I cannot overestimate this, all right? Slavery is an economic system. It is a horrendous economic system. It is one that oppressed millions of people for hundreds of years. However, okay, it still operates within an economy, all right? And something that I kind of want to drive home today is that a lot of the opposition to slavery in the first half of the 19th century is going to be on the grounds that it is not a strong economic system. And really, if you think about it, there's a lot of ties to the mercantilistic policies of Great Britain and empires in general, and on a smaller scale, the economics of slavery. Because what slavery does is it looks to take this individual, this human being, and basically get as much out of them as they possibly can without giving anything back in return. All right, and where in the short term that's beneficial. In the short term that can be a very beneficial thing for a slave owner, because obviously free labor, you can't beat free, okay? But in the long term, it doesn't help the economy, all right? And here's a very simple reason why, okay? In a capitalist system, okay, the system devised by Adam Smith, and there's a lot of baggage associated with that term capitalism, okay? In that system, if everybody pursues their own best interest, it ultimately works out best for everyone, okay? Now, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not that's true, or more to the point, to what extent that is true, okay? But if we obviously see in a system of slavery, much like a mercantilistic system, all right, the slave is not able to pursue their own best interest, okay? Under a capitalist theory, if that individual was able to pursue their self-interest, they were able to sell their labor, okay, i.e. earn a wage for their labor, then they would be able to take that earnings, and they would be able to put that back into the economy by either purchasing the product that they had just farmed or created, by buying other products, okay? And so ultimately, the argument that is going to be made by a lot of northern capitalists is that slavery is just it doesn't make sense economically. Okay, we're going to see some other things that are going to be developing here too, guys. If you talked about technology and manufacturing, internal improvements, all of those things are going to kind of further divide the North and the South as we're going forward here. Okay, so I want you guys to keep that in mind. Okay, what is dividing the North and the South as we talk about this? We're going to start with the North, and we're going to move on to the South. I'm going to hide myself so you guys don't have to look at my ugly haircut here. All right, so I want you guys to look at this, guys. Just go ahead, and this is actually a very similar map to what we looked at here. More just kind of talking about this population growth. And we see a large part of this population growth is taking place in the South and the West, and we're not yet getting to the northern regions here, okay, so where we are living. Okay, one kind of anomaly of that, one thing that's a little bit different from that is this area right here. Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and tell me what development and by 1820, okay, is going to lead to this area having an increased population. And I know many of you guys would have wrote in internal improvements. Specifically, the Erie Canal is going to be huge for the development of this area, and we're going to talk about that later as we go here. Okay, so transportation. So west of the Appalachians has always been kind of a difficult aspect to try to get that terrain. Okay, and this goes all the way back to talk about those synthesis points, making connection across time periods, to Bacon's Rebellion. Okay, so the fact that those Western farmers were farther away from markets. Okay, Whiskey Rebellion, same thing. Okay, farther away from markets, difficulty getting their product to market. All right. And so this is going to continue to be an issue. And that's why prior to 1815, if we go back to this map, when we look at places that were developed, they were largely developed along waterways. Okay, so we're gonna see here, like coming up through here, there's waterways coming into this part. Same with this. This is actually going to be expanded on to become the Erie Canal here. All right, so if you weren't by a waterway, it was very, very difficult to populate that particular area. I'm gonna have to look at what's going. I think this is the Ohio River. Absolutely. Okay, so this would be the Ohio River right here, which the Ohio River feeds into the Mississippi and obviously comes down here to New Orleans. Okay, so that's what explains this anomaly here. Okay, so after 1815, so in the 18 teens, we're going to have to try to increase that that infrastructure, okay, and maintain the economies farther to the west. Okay, so there's going to be a number of things that are going to this. Okay, so a national road, which is going to be completed in 1818, all right, is going to link the Potomac River, okay, which the Potomac River, many of you, if you travel to Washington, D.C., you've been on or by the Potomac, that goes right Maryland, Virginia, with the Ohio River, okay, and then Ohio River, like we just talked about, that's that river that's coming right here, right north. It divides Kentucky and Ohio. And that's going to be obviously a big improvement. Okay, we're going to see that these roads are still going to be very, very rough. Sometimes they're going to be constructed by splitting logs and having like the smooth half of the split log facing up, so that it gives you able transportation. Okay, we're also going to get the steamboat. Okay, which is something that is the inventor is Robert Fulton. This is going to be technology that is essentially going to be stolen from Great Britain and is going to be implemented in the United States. All right, but this makes traversing the Mississippi River, which really is the lifeline to the Western colonies, much easier. Okay, and if we look at this, okay, so the Mississippi River flows down full south, and so it goes out into the Gulf of Mexico down here, and that's all fine and dandy if you are traveling from the Great Lakes or the Ohio River down to New Orleans. Okay, but it gets a lot tougher when you got to go back up. All right, it's easy to go downriver, it's hard to go up. Okay, so the steamboat is going to be something that's going to be essential in making the transportation on the Mississippi River more efficient than ever it was. Okay, we're also going to have the Erie Canal, okay, which is going to go from Buffalo to Albany. All right, it is going to be funded by the New York State, and it encourages other states to follow suit. Okay, and that's actually going to be something that we're going to see here in a minute when we talk about Henry Clay's American system. Is the fact that it's being funded by states is going to be important. Okay, so this is the National Cumberland Road. Okay, so obviously, okay, this is something that was the brainchild of Henry Clay. Okay, Henry Clay, you know what? From last time, I didn't look up where he's from. He's from Kentucky or Tennessee. I can't remember which one. Kentucky, I think. Pretty sure Kentucky. All right, and the idea is that it's wants to try to increasingly connect the East with the West. Okay, all right. So this is the existing road that we have here. Okay, from Maryland to Cumberland. Okay, going all the way to Vandalia in Illinois, central Illinois. If any of you guys, I don't know if Oregon Trail is still a thing. Okay, in Oregon Trail, you start off from St. Louis. This is actually going to be after the Civil War that's going to be kind of happening. But the reason that you start off from St. Louis is going to get the reputation as being the gateway to the West. Okay, so that is this is going to be something, again, trying to connect East and West. Oh, those sound effects. All right, so going on to the Erie Canal. Okay, so DeWitt Clinton is the governor of New York. All right, people, while he's building it, it's going to be incredibly expensive. Okay, infrastructure is expensive. It's something that honestly, unfortunately, in this presidential debate, we haven't had very much conversation about infrastructure, but it is a huge aspect of our economy, because that's what allows products to get to markets. All right, and it is costly. Okay, but what the critics of it are going to call it Clinton's big ditch. Okay, but again, this is connecting to the Great Lakes. Okay, so this again, this is not just going to be important for New York. Okay, but this is going to be hugely important for the entire Great Lakes region. And I'm going to go back to this map. It's probably my best one. And the reason that it is, okay, so if you guys wrote the Erie Canal here, okay, that's why this is important, is because this canal, okay, it basically connects the Great Lakes, okay, which is this massive water system to the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so that means that anywhere here in this Great Lake region, okay, you are now able to get that onto a boat. Okay, let's say that you are in what's going to become a huge Western trading hub, Chicago. All right, you're able to sail that boat around the Michigan Peninsula, down through Lake St. Clair and the Detroit River, up into Lake Erie, and then ultimately into George Clinton's, or DeWitt Clinton's, excuse me, big ditch. Okay, that will get you to the Atlantic. Okay, so this is going to be hugely important to the Great Lakes region. All right, because previously, if you wanted to you could get goods to market from the Great Lakes. Okay, but you'd have to go down through the Mississippi. Okay, so you would maybe, or actually, I don't even actually think the Mississippi connected to the Great Lakes at this point. So this is hugely for getting this area developing more. Okay, and it's not coincidental that Michigan is going to be established as a state in, I believe, 1837. Okay, so about 20 years after this is going to be huge to our own personal state. Okay. Okay, so going on. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so here are the principal canals. Okay, and again, we kind of see here that this is the Lake Michigan does ultimately connect to the Mississippi River. Okay, but these are again trying to connect these spotted places. Why don't you guys just go ahead and make one historical conclusion? What economic effect do you think that this map had on society? And if you talked about further development of the Ohio River Valley, okay, more population here, then you are absolutely right. Okay, so this is something that's going to be very much again for developing these Western settlements, not settlements. I can't think of the word right now. Territories, Western territories. Okay, so yep, and if you guys are U of M fans, you guys know that the line is Champions of the West. Okay, so in the 1830s, 1840s, when Michigan was established, Michigan was in the West. All right. Okay, so here we go, guys. This is going to be hugely important. All right. So again, what is the conclusion that you can draw by looking at this map? Okay, so we have 1800 over here. Okay, we've got 1830 over here. Give me a cause and effect of this map. We've already talked about some of the causes. What do you think might be an effect? So a cause first, then an effect. Okay, so obviously causes the increase in internal improvements. Okay, so that cuts down the speed. Okay, of this going into of products getting to the market. An effect, which is something that you guys might notice here, is that look at the territories that we have in 1800 compared to what we have in 1830. Okay, so we are going to have an expansion of territories into the west. Okay, so we got Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama. Okay, and this expansion is ultimately going to be something that is good for both the North and the South, because it is having increased markets for goods. It's more raw materials. Okay, but as we look at this, guys, I again want to come back to this sectionalist divide, because we have Missouri was already the state that kind of caused a problem. We put Maine in there to kind of counter that. Okay, but we're going to see that this debate is going to continue to happen as we add states to the north and the south as to how do we maintain this holy balance moving forward. Okay, I want you guys to make a observation. Okay, so obviously we have 1840s here, 1860 here. Okay, so what's an observation you can make about railroads, and what is a historical conclusion that you can draw based off of this? Okay, there you go. Now, some of you guys may have read this little thing down here. Okay, one thing you might notice is that in the South, there is much less railroads, okay? There is really just these main veins that are going throughout the South, okay? And the main purpose of these railroads was to get the cotton products from the South to the Atlantic seaboard. Okay, but it is not nearly as crisscrossed and as in depth as it is in the Midwest. Okay. Other thing that you might notice, again, if you read this, is that these railroads are connecting, okay, all into each other and into New England. Okay. Most of these are east-west, east-west. There is very few north-south. Okay. The exceptions being here going through Washington, D.C. Okay. And then also this one coming down from Chicago into New Orleans. Okay. So this is, again, even within the way that our infrastructure is forming, look at this divide that we have here. Okay, is that we have the Northeast and the Midwest is becoming increasingly connected, making this one unit. And we say the same thing in the South, saying the Atlantic seaboard, southern states with the more western southern states being one kind of unit. All right, so even though this system by Henry Clay was intended to bring the country closer together, doesn't necessarily do that. Okay, so again, guys, this is one of those things that in May, I'm going to like jump out at you and scream at you to make sure that I'm just double checking to make sure that I hope I'm recording. Oh my gosh, I hope I'm recording. All right, so let me just okay, I am okay. So that's great news. I am recording. Sorry about that. I just had a panic attack. Okay, so I'm going to jump out at you guys, and I'm going to ask that you guys, oh my gosh, here we are again, to know this, okay? What is the Henry Clay's American system, right? And while I'm scrolling down here, what is Henry Clay's American system? Right, say go. All right, and you guys should have these three things, okay, guys? So it's a strong banking system, again, to have a stable currency. If you don't know what the purchasing value of your dollar is, it's really hard to start a business. Okay, so that's what the importance of banking is. Protective tariffs that come in 1816. Again, we talked about that the northern industrial economy is like an infant in its crib. Okay, I'm not going to use that same metaphor. Okay, but it's intended to protect it, okay, from the already more developed industrial system in England. And then network of roads and canals. Okay, so the idea is that this is supposed to connect politically and economically. All right, so Henry Clay's system is if we are economically dependent on each other, okay, then we are going to be more apt to be politically cooperative. And that makes sense. It makes sense. And there's actually, when we get into foreign policy in the 20th century, that's really going to be a key aspect of American foreign policy is building economic ties with other countries to kind of form these political ties as well. But ultimately, Madison's going to veto it. All right, and Madison recognizes what, that we need internal improvements. He does. He acknowledges that that's something that has to happen. However, he still vetoes it. So I want you guys to go ahead and think, why would James Madison, the father of the Constitution, considered by many to be the father of the Constitution, why would he choose to veto the American system, keeping in mind specifically networks of roads and canals? And if you guys said that because he is a strict constructionist, and because nowhere in Article 1, okay, which defines the powers of Congress, does it say that it has the ability to build infrastructure, okay? And if it doesn't say that the federal government has it, who has the right to do it? That's right, states. Okay, so he ultimately does veto this. Okay, so it doesn't get any farther than that. Okay, and here's another thing. Also, James Madison from the South here. Okay, West gets roads, canals, federal aid. East gets backing and protective tariffs from the West. South gets butt kiss, a big old nada. Okay, so even though the system is designed to tie the country together, it's more tying East and West together. So this part's successful. Okay, this part is successful. It does do this. Okay, but not so much in the South. Sound effects courtesy of Bob Loyd. May you rest in peace. Thank you, Dad. All right. So we're also going to see the beginning of industrialization here. Okay, so here we see like a mechanical loom here. Previously, prior to the factories, what you would generally have is you would have a woman or a number of women that would gather together in a house, and they would be all working at a loom, hand weaving whatever fabric or cloth that they were making. Problem is that that's time consuming and it's timely, and that those women are experts. They're craftsmen at what they do. Okay. So Samuel Slater, he's one of the first people that kind of takes the mechanical form of this, and he's able to have a machine do this. And instead of having a skilled laborer doing it, you're able to have a unskilled operator of the machine. Okay. So this is going to have a couple effects. One, this makes the price of cloth go way down, okay, which is good for, again, manufacturing, because it allows you to make better, cheaper goods. More people can afford things, okay? It makes things more affordable for your average person, okay? The negative here is we're going to see a transformation as to what it means, okay, to work. Okay, it's a transformation of what it means to work, and that's going to be very important, because prior to this, when you were in the cottage industry, when you were working in your own house and you were weaving, okay, you had a set amount of work that you did in a day, all right, and then when you were done, you were done. You went home afterwards, okay, and unfortunately, we don't see that happening in the factory, okay. So instead of working and just doing a set amount, like let's say you make, I don't know, 30 feet of fabric. Instead, you're working for a set amount of time. Okay, so now it's going to be, instead of 30 feet of fabric, you're working for 12 hours, and you're making as much fabric as you can in those 12 hours, okay, which is drastically going to change a lot of things. Okay, one thing that we're going to see here is that we're seeing, this is actually going to be an effect of the factory system, is that we see a declining size of families. I want you to think about, why is it that having increasingly industrial factories, industrial economy is going to make the number of children go down. And I want to keep in mind here, guys, that this is kind of before modern ideas of contraception. Okay, so what is going to cause families to decrease? And I'll be very impressed if anybody got this, but one of the things that causes this is, prior to the factory system, okay, a husband and wife were basically partners in a small business, the small business being their farm, and they would work together. The man would be in the field, the woman would do things in the house, but more or less they would all be kind of in the same situation for a long period of time. Okay, with the factory system, you have the man going off to work for 10, 11, 12 hours a day. Okay, and I'm, guys, just to be perfectly blunt, there's less opportunity. There's less opportunity to perform the act in which makes children. Okay, so that's going to cause family sizes to go down in the South. Okay, something that I'm not going to be shocked of is that if about a year to a year and a half after this whole quarantine thing, and the fact that we have increasing people working from home, if you're not going to see a baby boom in the next year and a half to 2 years. Now, if that makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but reproduction is a part of the economy. Okay, so we are going to see smaller family size. All right, and this also is going to this idea of male work and female work. Okay, so the fact that, again, a male worker is going to he's going to go to a job, and he's going to earn a salary, and he's going to bring that home, where a female is basically just maintaining the home. Now, what's important about this is, in the first half of the 19th century, women did not have legal protections. Okay, basically, all of the income, everything was owned by the man, and the woman didn't have a whole lot of say in that. Okay, this is going to be something that's going to be important when we talk about reform movements not next week, but the week after, because women are going to really kind of take the brunt of alcohol consumption. So a husband might choose to go and spend his entire wage on alcohol, and there's nothing left to feed the family. All right, and increasing attention of women to childbearing. Okay, so more attention is given to the children that the woman does create. And this is the classic. This is kind of, it's not the beginning of the cult of domesticity. Okay, so go ahead and Google that real quick. What's the cult of domesticity? But it's really starting to be a reshaping of it. Industrialization kind of spurs this thing forward. Okay, yeah, so it's going to be fastest in the new cities, commercial trading, agricultural, largely rural domestic areas. In seaports, growth is derived from commerce within like the hinterlands. Okay, so the hinterlands being like the areas farther out to the west. The market revolution in the countryside produces beginning in industry and greatest period of urban growth in our history. Okay, so we are going to see, and this is actually, if you go into like an old eastern seaboard town, you see how they're structured. It's kind of like haphazard. It's not as much organized. Where if you were to go into a even like Detroit can be a bad example, but Detroit was a planned city. It's supposed to be like spokes on a wheel. Okay, so like that you have going out from that wider area. Okay, so these cities, Indianapolis is a great example of it. Were very much designed to be industrial cities. Western New York Farm. All right, so one thing that you guys have to know, so the Rhode Island system, okay, so this is the father, this is going to be Samuel Slater, all right, spinning mill, Pawtucket, blah, blah, blah. All right, I want to talk more about this guy, Francis Cabot Lowell, who you guys should know this. This is in Massachusetts, not actually far from where the Battle of Lexington and Concord was. Okay, but in the first part of the 1800s, this was he used mechanization, and he hired single women from farmers as workers in order to operate these. Okay, now at first, okay, so the Industrial Revolution really starts as this utilitarian, so the greatest good for the greatest amount of people kind of movement. He tries to make this like kind of like utopian thing. So women would work for like 10 hours a day, and then in the evening they would go and attend lectures. They would get an education. All right. And many of these women would go on to be social reformers. Okay, so this is going to be what this starts as, but later on, as Francis Cabot Lowell kind of falls out of ownership of it, it's the wages are going to drop, and working conditions are going to get more harsh. This is really going to lead into a difficult time in the second half of the 20th century. Yeah. So this is one thing that I want to make a point of here is this term wage slaves is going to be important, because as we have this debate between the North and the South about slavery, okay, the South's criticism is going to be that, essentially, right, if you're a person and you're going to work for 10 hours a day and you're making $5 a day with that 10-hour workday, and then you're taking that $5 and you're using that to pay your own factory, to have a place to live, for your food, for everything. The South's going to argue that's essentially just it's slavery with more steps. Okay, for my Rick and Morty fans out there, it's slavery with more steps. All right. There's obviously some serious criticisms to that statement, because obviously a wage slave, okay, somebody working in the South, they can choose to try to go find a job someplace else. Okay. But the thing I will point out, and this is important, that with increasing use of factories, okay, where you used to have artisans, okay, so people, if you made a chair, somebody made that chair from start to finish, and they were a craftsman, okay, so they worked really hard on that chair. They might have spent days working on it, okay? Where now, instead of having one person make the entire chair from start to finish, you might have 6 or 7 people doing a different part of the process, okay, and doing that with a machine. Okay, so these are essentially unskilled laborers. Okay, so what is going to be the effect? Okay, think about the economic effect from going from being an artisan that is highly skilled, okay, to being a wage slave that is not as much skilled. And if you said that it's easier to replace, that's going to be a very big part of it. I very much would like to figure out how I can get my camera back. Okay, I don't know if I can or not. All right, so occupy yourselves. Occupy yourselves. I'm hoping that maybe I can get my camera back. Yeah, I can. All right. Okay, there it is. I know that the haircut's ugly and it might be freaking some of you guys out, but I'm actually just now realizing that I would it's going to be harder for me to do my head puzzle. Okay, and again here with this. Duplicate slides. Okay. All right, we're going to move on, talk about the South a little bit, guys. So one thing I'm going to talk about right off the get-go here, guys, is that when we talk about the South, these first images, we're going to talk about slavery, and there's going to be some brutal images on this screen. All right, so I just want you guys to be aware of that as I get ready to present this. is that there is going to be some difficult things that we are going to be seeing on this screen. And the point is I do not want to hide from you the brutality that is the institution of slavery, okay? Because it is very important for our understanding of American history. Okay. Okay. So this is based off of Liberty, Equality, Power. Okay, guys. So here, just to start us off, I want you guys to note inspection of a sale of a Negro. All right, what are the things that you notice, okay, when you're looking at this image? What are the things that you notice? Okay, so I'm sure that some of you guys may have noticed that here we have what looks like some finished goods. Okay, obviously we have what could be molasses or rum. We have boxes full of appear to be firearms. It appears as if we have a couple of Europeaners here that are bargaining with indigenous Africans. Okay, it's something that this was something that, and I don't want to overemphasize it, but it was perpetrated by West African slave traders. Okay, so Africans themselves. And this person, again, inspecting the teeth was a common thing that you would do to kind of determine the health of a slave. Okay, so again, very horrendous. We will see, guys, and this is something that's kind of important to note as we go forward in American history. One thing that we're going to see different forms of resistance, okay, from African slaves. I'm sorry, from people of African descent in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere. And we're going to talk about some revolutions today. Okay, we're going to talk about 3 rebellions. We're going to talk about Gabriel's Rebellion, Denmark Vesey, and Nat Turner. Okay. But those were kind of extremes. And in large part, people that were born in America, okay, were less likely to revolt. We saw that most of the revolutions, most of the revolts were come from people that were born in Africa. And that doesn't mean that there wasn't other forms of resistance. Okay. And one of the most common forms of resistance by African slaves was absconding or running away. Okay. And this is going to become a huge issue as we go into the divide between the North and the South, because where are these slaves going to run away to? The North, and where they're ultimately going to get aid from Northerners to try to get to a place where they are beyond the reach of their former owners. Okay, this is going to put a wedge between the North and the South even further than it was before. Okay, typically speaking, I will say, so there's been a great deal of analysis on the caricature of the slave that runs away. Typically speaking, slaves that ran away were men. Okay, they were typically men that were between the ages of like 15 and 22. They were typically pretty healthy. And there's some reasons for this, and they're generally single. Okay, we are going to see it, and this is going to be another reason for why slave families are going to be important to the system of oppression that's going to be used against them, is that is going to be something that is going to tie individuals to their masters and to their plantations. It's much more difficult if you are a mother, okay, maybe if you have multiple children, to take multiple small children and the arduous journey that it would take to go north and ultimately escape to your freedom. Okay, so that's something that we're going to see there. But we are going to see other forms of resistance, work slowdowns, okay, sabotage, okay, so actually like sabotaging equipment or sabotaging crops. Okay, a number of things, and actually a lot of stereotypes that are going to be associated with African Americans going forward into the Jim Crow South are going to be things that are really systems of resistance. Okay, so the stereotype of African Americans being lazy, okay, is very much going to be, well, you're not paying me any money, so I'm not going to work really hard. Okay, if they weren't paying me, I would still work hard for you guys. But I wouldn't be in here at 6 o'clock in the morning talking to a camera for an hour. Probably not. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. Okay, so what do we see here? What is this woman doing? Okay, look at what we have going on here. Okay, and if you guys have, this woman is pleading to not have her child sold away from her, you're absolutely right. Okay, and again, guys, this is a side effect of the banning of the slave trade in 1809. I keep messing up that date. Okay, is that we are actually going to see that slaves are going to be less needed in the East and more needed in the West as cotton plantations expand there. And again, guys, just the brutality of slavery. If anybody would like to have a better understanding of this, I highly recommend. I don't think I actually have it on my desk right now, but Frederick Douglass's Slave Narrative. He talks very much about the institution of slavery, and actually, Frederick Douglass, and maybe we'll look at this document next week. Frederick Douglass was he was basically farmed out to a man that was a famous slave breaker. Okay, so if you were a disruptive slave, or if you were a slave that caused a lot of issues for your owner, you would basically they would sell you out, or they would even like give your labor away free to a person that was known for breaking slaves. Okay, and this was it's horrendous. Okay, it's horrendous, obviously, as we can see it. It's not just the physical abuse, okay, which the physical abuse obviously is immense, okay, but it's also the psychological abuse that was it's almost like the psychological warfare to break down any hope or any individuality within the person. All right, and barring them from being able to read, and breaking up families, and all these things are going to be elements of that. Okay, here we see another inspection. Okay, this is a cotton field. If you guys have ever seen a cotton field, it's actually cotton has like natural pickers in it. Okay, it is a very labor intensive crop to harvest. Okay, and oftentimes we're going to talk about this in the cotton fields. You had to pick like a certain quantity, or you would be subjected to beatings, like we saw in the previous slide. Okay, here we see different implements that were used to try to, again, control. Okay, different systems of control. We see here a muzzle that was put on onto slaves. Okay, we see different brands. Okay, so that like if a slave does run away, this is essentially like saying that where the person is going to go back to. We're also going to see that some people are going to be branded with like the runaway, are going to have fingers cut off as punishment for absconding or running away. All right, that's going to be something that's going to be common as well. And here's an image of the actual branding. If you guys, I mean, I don't think these would basically be heated up and burnt into your skin. Yeah. So and here and again, this is going to be kind of it's actually we're gonna talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the reform movement. But the abolitionist movement in the North is really going to focus on the horrendous nature of slavery, which it truly was horrendous. And it's going to try to kind of turn this moral or popular opinion of it away. Whereas it's actually going up leading into the 1830s, there was anti-slavery. There was institutions in the South. Okay, but with the Great Awakening and we'll talk about this guy named David Walker, who is a free black from Boston. It kind of dies out, and again, moving towards the sectionalist kind of view. All right, how is this map related to the U.S. Senate? Okay, keeping in mind this right here. And if you guys said that the slave states had a larger voice in the U.S. Senate, you are absolutely correct. Okay, that is going to change. New York and in New Jersey are ultimately going to change over to being free states, but at this point in 1789 they were not. Okay, so that is something that we've talked about, has definitely influenced it. Okay, King Cotton Unbound. Okay, who is King Cotton? What or who is King Cotton? Okay, and this is something that is going to be very important as we get to, you guys see this date here, 1861. Okay, King Cotton is going to be basically the view of the South that cotton is so important to European countries, specifically Great Britain, because the textile industry is their major industry in the South. Okay, it's so important to the textile industry that they will be forced to kind of aid the South in the American Civil War. Okay, so they have this view that cotton is so crucial to the global economy, which it is. Okay, that's something that's going to maintain ties to European countries. Okay, we're ultimately going to see, guys, the abolitionist movement actually starts a little bit earlier in England. Okay, and so that's going to be the downfall of this idea of King Cotton. Okay, so let's talk about the different kinds of farming. Okay, so the Southeast. because Virginia, South Carolina, these were the richest men in the Republic. Okay, so these were people that had slaves in their family for hundreds of years, and they had these very popular crops that, although they were declining, okay, tobacco and rice declining, okay, so they kind of faced an uncertain future, okay? But what they did have is they had a huge amount of capital built into their slaves. Okay, so this is something that we're going to see again. Another divide with sectionalism is that the North is going to put their money into industrialization, okay, the labor of machines, where the South is going to put their money into the labor of humans, okay, which is going to be very important as we move forward here, especially with the future of slavery being uncertain. Okay, here we see an overseer whose job was to literally just watch and make sure that slaves are doing their job. Okay, in the Chesapeake colonies, okay, chief crop was tobacco. Slaves and tobacco depleted soil and forced planters to try their crops. But we're going to see that they're going to kind of move more into grain crops, which is going to need artisan slaves, so slaves that are able to turn like wheat and barley into like flour and into rye. Okay, and so they are going to need more skilled slaves, but they're going to need less slaves. Okay, so what is going to happen to the fact that they need less slaves? What is going to happen to these slaves here? Okay, and some of you guys may have said that they'll be emancipated, which is partially true, but many of them are actually going to be sold for a profit to these developing farmlands in the Southwest here. Okay, I want you guys, so Maryland and Delaware began to free their slaves. They have less need for them. Okay, emancipation moved forward slowly in Virginia. Okay, but I want you guys to look at this this quote here. All right, there's two of them. Okay, so look at this quote. I want you guys to tell me, speaker, occasion, audience, purpose. Ready, set, go. Okay, so one thing that we will see here, guys, is that Jefferson firmly believed, okay, so purpose, okay, he did not think that whites and blacks could live together. He didn't think that it was possible. But he also, if we look at this, we have the wolf by the ears, and we can neither hold him nor safely let him go. Justice is in one scale, self-preservation in the other. So we felt that the reason that we need to continue slavery is because if we stop slavery, it'll basically cause like the downfall of the white race. Okay, and this language is something that you still see in some white nationalist groups, is this idea of this battle between the races. It's ultimately a very ridiculous idea sociologically. We're no different biologically from each other, and culturally that's a cultural construct. Okay, but this is going to lead to some people that were trying to solve this problem was the American Colonization Society. Okay, and that was trying to maybe like come up with an idea of taking freed slaves and sending them to back to Africa. Okay, setting up an American colony in Africa for freed blacks. Okay, and actually Henry Clay was an advocate for this because again he was economically and morally somewhat against slavery, okay? But he ultimately, he didn't think that whites and blacks could live together. This was a very common view, even by people that were maybe less racist, but everyone's still a little bit racist. Everyone's a little bit racist. All right, so the Low Country, so South Carolina, Georgia, they required a lot of slaves, okay? So the Deep South, we're going to see the highest concentration of slave populations for this reason. All right, and planters continue to import as many Africans as possible. You know, this is going obviously up until 1809 when it's going to be playing. Okay, task system, and I think that we talked about this a little bit already. Okay, so this is more in the mid-Atlantic slave states. Okay, but this is going to basically they're going to have a set amount of tasks, and whenever they're done with that, they're done with what they need to do. Okay, this is going to allow them some level of autonomy. Okay, so some of them hired themselves out. Okay, they tended garden. Some of them were skilled like blacksmiths or carpenters, so they would make small wages for that. All right, and then they were able to actually save that money to eventually buy their freedom or buy the freedom of loved ones. Okay, so that's going to be a system that is going to ultimately be less oppressive as we see in the Deep South. Okay, all right. Okay, so 1801, 1859. I want you guys maybe think about two to three historical developments that cause this to happen from 1801 to 1859. Okay, if you said the Louisiana Purchase, that would be a great one. If you said the development of the Cotton Gin by Eli Whitney, that would be another great one. Even I think that if we were to talk about the increasing railroads in the South, okay, so that makes it more able to have these different these plantations set up, okay, with in the Cotton Belt. Those would all be acceptable. All right, King Cotton. Here's just another version of it again, moving farther and farther west. Okay, upland Georgia. Yeah, and here's something that's really important. Native people are driven out. Okay, so we're going to see that these areas, okay, Georgia specifically, okay, I don't want to, I want to say the Cherokee. We're actually going to talk about the Cherokee Nation. I'm pretty sure. I want to double check this. They actually developed their own constitution. They have their own newspaper. They come up with a written language for their own for their language, and they do a lot of things to basically to civilize themselves, quote unquote. Okay, but that's not going to prevent them from ultimately kind of being pushed out of there, which is going to be important as we go forward into Jacksonian democracy. Okay, interstate slave trade. We've already talked a great deal about this, guys, but it's very similar to the Middle Passage. Okay, it's similarly going to be horrific as we go east to west. Okay, and we're going to see this as largely around the seaboard, around Florida, and then around the Mississippi River. That we're going to see this concentration of slaves moving west. Okay, and then 1790, 1820, and 1860. I believe by 1820 we have about 3 million slaves. I'm sorry, 2 million slaves in the United States. Where in 1860 that number is going to increase to continue to increase again, going back to that idea of geometrical growth of populations. So talk to your math teachers about that. I just wanted to find the chart in your AMSCO really quickly. So by 1860 in all states, so 1800 we're going to have 900,000, 1830 roughly 2 million, and in 1860 almost 4 million. Okay, so this is exponential growth. Okay, something that we have become familiar with in the age of Corona. Okay, and cotton is going to be very profitable. So one thing that I'm going to point out here, guys, is if you notice, it's something that's it's like a 1-to-1. We live in a global society, and we even lived in a global society in the 1810s. Okay, this is going to be a very profitable industry. And because of that, the harder they push their slaves, the more money that they make. Okay, so it becomes a very difficult system. And something that I want to point out, that as if the price of textiles in Liverpool goes up, the price of slaves in Birmingham goes up too. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution in the textile industry in Great Britain is directly tied with slavery in the American South, as much as they want to kind of ignore it. Okay, so slaves worked dawn to dusk. Okay, again, this is a week's picking. Okay, so a huge amount of cotton that's picked. Okay, all right. What's one thing that you guys notice about this chart? Race to go. Okay, and if one thing that you guys noticed is that most of the slaves were owned by a very small percentage of people, okay, then you are absolutely right. Okay, so a large portion of people only owned 2 to 4. Okay, like slightly less than that just owned 1. Okay, but a lot of this wealth, and again, at this time in American history, human beings, slaves, represented actual wealth. Okay, that's like you owning any other commodity. It's like if somebody, and I hate to make this comparison, but it's what it is. This is chattel slavery. If you owned 100 heads of cattle, okay, that's actual wealth that you own. Okay, that you can exchange. You can sell that and get actual monetary value for it. Okay, that was concentrated in the hands of a few. Okay, so Southern population in 1860. Okay, one thing that I want you guys to notice here, where do you see the free blacks? Okay, where do you see the free blacks, in what areas, and what might account for that? Okay, if you guys noticed that it was largely in this mid-Atlantic region, okay, that's where the free blacks are ultimately living, and if you made that equation that this was largely a task system, so that they were able to, some African Americans, some slaves were able to earn a wage and ultimately purchase their freedom. Okay, and that these are states that manumission was a little bit more prevalent. okay, then you are correct. Okay, Louisiana is a little bit more of an anomaly. New Orleans is going to have a shockingly amount of autonomy for some African slaves, and actually in some areas like Mississippi and Alabama, Arkansas, slaves would run away from their plantation like for the weekend. They would almost like abscond for a week or 2 weeks, and it'd be like a vacation. And since there was a decently large free black population in New Orleans, they could blend into New Orleans and could live there for a week or so, and then go back to work. And this depends on their master and what kind of punishment would be up for that. But that is something that we're going to see there. Another thing that's going to come out of the relative amount of freedom in New Orleans is we're going to see jazz. Any music fans in the house, jazz is going to largely develop in New Orleans, influenced from the African and Caribbean style of music that is going to be present in New Orleans. So there's another small effect that we're going to see there. And we see, guys, as you guys move farther west, okay, look at the proportions. Okay, the slaves outnumber in South Carolina. Okay, again, this is being rice. That's an important thing to keep there. All right. In southern families, and we're going to see this for a long time. Okay, so it was really this antebellum. Ante means before, like your ante in poker is the bet that you make before play starts. Okay, and bellum means war. So this antebellum together means before the Civil War, before war. Okay, distrusted outsiders. It was a patriarchal society. Okay, honor was huge, and this is something that we're going to see. This was still in the age where you would challenge people to duels if they insulted your honor. One thing that I want to point about philosophically about this concept of honor is what you think is owed to you. Okay, and so I'm going to make a PBIS tie-in here, guys. You talked about PBIS all day yesterday. Okay, so when we talk about honoring our hallway, that's what we owe to ourselves and to our school when we walk down the hallways here. It's what we are promised when we come to school. We are supposed to have some level of honor and some respect. Okay, in the South they have the same kind of concept. Okay, but it's a little bit more warped. Okay, they think that because of your class, because of who they are, their status, that they are owed a certain amount of respect, and this goes doubly for people that are African Americans. All right, and if that honor is impugned, okay, then there's retribution needs to be taken. Okay, and so this is an attitude that's going to form attitudes towards African Americans in the South and the North going forward for the next 200 years. Okay, so in 1830, 1/3 of Southern whites owned only 1/3 of slaves owned any slaves. Okay, so this was subsistence plus agriculture, so that they would just make what they could to live and then sell like a little bit extra. Okay. However, despite only 1/3 of whites owning slaves, it's going to be hugely popular. Okay, and it is popular. Okay, because of this idea that we're going to talk about, which is something that one of my professors at U of D Mercy, Roy Finkenbein, who I'm currently working with, he calls the Southern American Dream. All right, and what the Southern American Dream is based off of this hierarchy. Okay, at the very top you had the slaveocracy, this very small amount of people. Okay, that had the most amount of slaves. Okay, and below them you had the plain folk, the yeomen. All right, then you had freemen, then you had black slaves. All right, this is how the society was structured. Now, why would these people support slavery? Go ahead and say that. Why would these people that didn't own slaves, didn't economically benefit from it, why would they support slavery? And if you answered, okay, it's because it's the American dream is this idea that I constantly want to improve. I want to better myself, okay? I want to be this person that's at the top of the hierarchy, okay? So they didn't want to get rid of slavery because they hope to one day work really hard. Maybe you get yourself 1 or 2 slaves, okay, and then you're able to expand your farm a little bit. Maybe you get that little pasture there, and it's really good for rye, and you develop your own little, like maybe your whiskey distillery, which you start selling and making more money. Okay, all right. So that's a big part of it, is that they wanted to be this. This plain folk wanted to move up to this. Okay, so it's that desire, and that's really what maintains the American dream in general. Okay, if we think about less than 1% of the U.S. population has more than 10% of our wealth. Okay, why are we able to sustain that system? Because the other 99% of Americans want to one day be the Richard Brands or like the Mark Zuckerbergs or the whoever it is. They want that, so they want to maintain that system because they don't want to miss out on their opportunity. Okay, they want to get to that. The other thing is and this is going back to this entire conception of like where race comes from, is these people, okay, they were better than these people. The society had told them that they were better. Okay, they weren't at the bottom of the social rung. Okay, they were a couple levels above it. Okay, so even though these people looked down on these people still had someone to look down on. And that's an important part of the human psychology, is that we always want somebody else to look down on. All right. Okay, so the private life of slaves, again, we're going to talk about this, guys, and I know I've been talking for a long time. I'm tired. I've been talking for too long. It's 7:25. I got proctor testing a little bit. Okay, all right, but they are going to allow some privileges. Okay, and these are going to be kind of here's the thing. In any system where you're trying to get compliance, you have carrots and sticks. Okay, carrots are things that encourage you. Okay, and sticks are punishments, things that dissuade you from doing something. Okay, so certain privileges. Okay, so the ability to go visit a relative or a family member that is like one plantation down, or the ability to have your own like private family. Okay, those were privileges that could be taken away from you, and that was a form of psychological control. All right. They also encouraged marriages, okay, which is something that we talked about already in great deal. All right. However, they were still vulnerable because, again, especially young men, young male slaves were the most valuable slaves. Okay, and those were the ones that were most likely to be torn from their families and shipped out to the West. Okay, here we see again. This is not. I think that we actually might have even looked at a very similar picture of this. Okay. Very haphazardly holding a child. Okay. Here we see 5 generations, okay, all living on the same plantation. Again, I will tell you guys, so Frederick Douglass talks about this, how in his own family, that his great-grandmother basically was the progenitor, was the ancestor of like the entire 70 people that worked on that plantation. Okay, so multiple generations of people. And when his owner died, they had all of these slaves. Basically, they had to come here to be evaluated to see how much his estate was worth. And this grandmother that had basically made all of this wealth for this family was given no value. And so they put her out into a shed in the middle of the woods to die alone, away from her family. And so that is one of the horrors of this, is once you get done with your working life, okay, then you have little value. Another thing that we're going to see is sometimes childbearing slaves, okay, that mothers, okay, they would oftentimes be expected to go right back into the fields after they had their children. Okay, so that would be the role of sometimes of older African American women, older slaves who had been past their prime days of work. They would be tasked with caring for children as mothers return to the fields. All right. Yep. So again, we talked about this. Slaves trade becomes an important source of income. Okay, we are going to start to see these professional slave traders. Okay, and that yep, all things that we've talked about. Moving on. Here we see slave cabins. If you guys have ever been to a plantation in the South, at Mount Vernon, South Carolina, I was at one. It's very important to see how these people lived. It was very humbly. But they did still manage to have a sense of community and a sense of culture, and we see a lot of that with like back in my day, it was like Babalo Island, which they talked about like these different like Briar Rabbit, like Briar Rabbit was somebody that would continually try to like get out of these scrapes and like outsmart the fox and all these different things. So they had these like still had culture that kind of like passed on teaching and knowledge to their children. Okay, so despite the incredible situation that they were in. Okay, so and something that we're going to talk about more next week is going to be the beginning of African American Christianity. Okay, and this is going to be very much closely tied to the Second Great Awakening, okay, which is going to be an explosion of religion, very similar to the First Great Awakening, where people are it's becoming increasingly democratized, all right? So it's going to, Southern evangelicals embrace slaves and consider their souls worth saving. So this is going to be, we're going to talk about the different means by which Southerners justified slavery. Converting them to Christianity was one of the leading ones, okay? And so they justified this by like saving their souls and putting them into Christianity. All right, but we are going to see that a lot of African slaves are going to take Christianity and make it their own. There's no way for you guys to go. Just guess. What do you think is going to be the most popular book of the Bible? Here's a hint. It's in the Old Testament, and it has to do with Egypt. All right, if you guys said Exodus, you are absolutely correct, okay? Exodus is the book where the slaves are delivered from Egypt by God, okay? So there's clearly some messaging there that is easily for them to adapt. Okay, oftentimes these meetings would be held in secret. Okay, Frederick Douglass actually he would hold these private meetings and he taught a number of other slaves how to read and how to read the Bible, okay, through these prayer meetings. But it was often done in secret because although this is they thought they were saving their souls. Okay, a little bit of religion can be a bad thing and encourage some people to uprise. One being Nat Turner, who we'll talk about here in a second. Historical people. Yep, there you go. Exodus. Yeah. Moving on. Okay, so the major slave revolts. Okay, most of them are going to be on the eastern seaboard. Okay, along the seaboard, they're going to be less in the dense areas. Okay, why is that? Okay, I want you guys to think. Why do you think that the major slave revolts were in these large population centers? And there's different reasons for it. Okay, but mainly being that the more rural you are, the more spread out you are, the less likely you are to have be able to organize people towards different things. Okay. Also, escapes is a more common form of resistance in those areas. And another thing that I'm going to say though, in these large population areas, it's more common that these messages are going to go from other areas. I talked about David Walker earlier. David Walker is going to give a pamphlet where he's basically, the line is, and I'm going to butcher it, but he basically says he tells slaves, he openly encourages them to revolt. Okay, he says that killing a man who is trying to kill you is no more wrong than a thirsty man taking a drink of water. All right, he's actually going to take this pamphlet and he's going to sew it inside of clothes that they're going to ship south to try to get into the hands of slaves. So if you were by shipping areas, you're more likely to get these kind of messages. Okay, we're also going to see like revolutions in other places like Haiti and even France are going to encourage slaves. We're going to see that in the case of Gabriel. All right, so those are a couple of reasons why it's more common in population centers. Gabriel, okay, some people refer to him as the American Toussaint, or I can never say his name right, but the Haitian revolutionary leader. He's going to be incredibly well educated. He's going to be intelligent. He's very much going to drape himself in the language of the French Revolution, very similar to the Haitian Revolt. Okay, so he's going to be influenced by that. Okay, ultimately, the plot is foiled and they are executed. Okay, next one we're going to see is Denmark Vesey. This is going to take place in Charleston. The idea is that they were going to commandeer some ships and ultimately escape. Okay, in both of these cases, guys, what leads them to fail is that, and this goes to this psychological control that slavery gives you, is that they are going to be given up by slaves, okay, by people within their own conspiracies. Okay, so that's going to be kind of a paradox that we're going to see here, is because that fear is so deep within people, within these slaves, that they are afraid. They are afraid of it going forward and ultimately being punished for it. So that's what we see in this. Nat Turner is going to be the most successful slave revolt that we're going to see in the Americas. I think he ultimately kills 32 men, women, and children. Nat Turner is a complicated character. Okay, he's a preacher. Okay, he's like a fire and brimstone preacher. He received a message by God in the 1830s. Actually, there was a solar eclipse. Okay, and he sees that as being like this message from God that like action needs to be taken. Okay, they ultimately they get like I think it's Southampton, Virginia. Yep, Southampton County, Virginia. They get so far, but ultimately they're routed back by militia. Okay, and he is executed. Okay, and this is gonna be a document that we might actually look at next week. Okay, 100 are put to death. Okay, but this is actually up to 1831. Virginia had been moving towards the direction of manumission. Remember the gradual release of slaves, and this is going to be something that's going to kind of turn the clock back on that. That's going to make people feel kind of uncomfortable about it. Oh gosh, yep. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about next week, guys. I'm sorry if this one was a little bit longer. I hope you guys are having a good Thursday, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys whenever it is I can see you guys. Peace. I think peace. If you're still seeing me struggle, I'm sorry.